When I first came to the United States back in 2005, I first came to Ohio, to Lima. And every time I looked cold, because I was always cold in Lima. It was very freezing. And I had my jacket. And every time people saw me, they said, one day your blood will become thicker. And then you're not going to be as cold as you are now. But that didn't work. It wasn't like that. And it is the same for me being speaking in front of people. It's always something that makes me a little nervous, and people say, you get used to it. I think it's going to be as cold as Lima. It's going to be the same, just like, it's not going to get any thicker. But by God's grace, I'm sharing the Word of God with you today. And I'm going to be going through some readings as we go. So just bear with me as we get to it. But basically, I am reading the story of the widow that was visited by Elijah, the prophet. And the story is written in 1 Kings chapter 17. 1 Kings chapter 17. And starting at verse number 1. It says, Elijah the Tishbe from Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, as certainly as the Lord God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be no dew or rain in the years ahead unless I give the command. The Lord told him, leave here and travel eastward. Hide out in the Keris Valley near the Jordan. Drink from the stream. I have already told the ravens to bring you food there. So he did, as the Lord told him. He went and lived in the Keris Valley near the Jordan. The ravens would bring him bread and meat each morning and evening, and he would drink from the stream. After a while, the stream dried up because there had been no rain in the land. The Lord told him, get up, go to Zarephath in Sidonian territory, that's part of Lebanon, and live there. I have already told the widow who lives there to provide for you. So he got up and went to Zarephath. When he went through the city gate, there was a widow gathering wood. He called out to her, please give me a cup of water so I can take a drink. As she went to get it, he called out to her, please bring me a piece of bread. She said, as certainly as the Lord your God lives, I have no food except for a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. Right now I'm gathering a couple of sticks for a fire. Then I'm going home to make one final meal for my son and myself. After we have eaten that, we will die of starvation. Elijah said to her, do not be afraid. Go and do as you planned. But first, make a small cake for me and bring it to me. Then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord God of Israel says. The jar of flour will not be empty, and the jug of oil will not run out until the day the Lord makes it rain on the surface of the ground. And she went and did what she was told. Let's just pray. Lord, at this time we come to you and we commit, Lord, our time to you, Lord. And we pray, Lord, that you would speak through your servant, Lord, and hide the servant behind the cross, Lord. We thank you for your word. We thank you that you gave us your word so that we can learn and live according to it. In Jesus' name we pray. Well, this woman, this lady, this widow, was living in a time that was full of bad news. Politically, that the kingdom was divided at that time. The kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Israel, they were not one like the days of King David. This was a time when there were two kingdoms. There was Judah's kingdom and Israel's kingdom, and they had different different kings at that time. So the kingdom politically was divided, and everything looked like everything was going in a bad situation. Elijah, because of the rebellion of the king, told the king that it will not be raining for a long, long time until he prays again for rain. So basically, all the crops, all the animals, everyone, people were suffering. So this woman, this lady, lived in a time full of bad news. In Lebanon, during the war, we lived in a time when, because of the war, we didn't have power. So basically, when people had battery power, because we had some charges, sometimes the power would be there for like a couple hours a day. If the lines are still in a good shape, then the power might come for a couple of hours a day. So people had chargers and batteries like vehicle batteries. And they would charge those so that when night comes, they can use some light, but they also use it for one very important thing they wanted to know, is the news. And of course, it wasn't like these days when everything is fast. The news had to be, broadcasted at 8 or 8:30 in the evening, and that's when everybody would be watching the TV and listening to the news. During the day, though, as kids, we would hear the bombs, like we would hear the noises of the firearms and things that are happening in different areas. But because we didn't have the news yet, we basically cared less. Because like something happened over there, if you can hear it far, that means it's far from you. That's how you survive it. So I'm not in the news. It's not in here. So I can hear it, that means it's far. So basically you don't worry much about it. But what happened and who won which side, because Lebanon was in a civil war, they call it civil war, basically they divided the people, other countries came in, they divided the country into different groups, and then each one was one part, and they caused the war. So you would want to know, who won this battle, what's happening, how near is it going, because sometimes they would give warning, say, hey, if you live in this area, something's going to happen, you might want to leave your area. So people didn't worry much about things until they sat and listened to the news at 8 or 8:30 in the evening. That was the news time. But then after that, naturally you forget, because you get away from the TV, and then you you just kind of live your own life. You just want to survive, so you forget much about the news. Well, sometimes people say that they did have a more peaceful life before, during the war in Lebanon, than they do now, because of the other bad news that are happening all the time. And we face this all the time as well, especially with social media. On our phone, every time the phone rings, if it's not a message from a friend, it's some kind of news. And then we look to it. Sometimes it's health issue news. You shouldn't be eating this. Now you're telling me I've been eating this all my life. Last 2 weeks I heard there was an article saying bacon is good for your life. Everyone was happy. 2 days ago someone said, no, it wasn't right. And it's always been the case, right? You eat bacon, you don't eat bacon. Is it good or not? This food is good. There's always news that are bombarding our life. And because we naturally respond to news, the problem has become is that we have constantly bad news. All the time. Political people fight, and they just say something to each other, and then we get annoyed about it too. We feel offended as well. Anything that happens is now directly affecting our daily life by the minute. We're working, the phone rings, we look at it, it's some kind of news. And this is really taking a lot of our physical energy, our stress, our mental energy, and it does affect us in many ways. The funny though, and I think it's because of my English, sometimes I think about the words a little more than you just usually, because that's your language. The funny thing about news is that they call it breaking news. Because what they mean, basically, and I know that, what they mean by breaking news is like news that are fresh, that is new, that just came up. Something just happened, and that's why they call it breaking news. But when you're someone from a different country and you think of the language, breaking also is breaking something. So I think it is actually nerve-breaking news. It's not breaking news as in news that, because actually it's not breaking news when it's all about crime. It's always there. You know, the first 4 people on earth, Adam, Eve, Cain and Abel, 25% of the people died, were killed by another 25%, right? 4 people. That's big news. 25% of the, if you put it that way, that's a big number. 25% of the world died, were killed by another 25%, while the other 50% were maybe cookies. I don't know. It's the news, it's where we put the news, it makes us worry about our life. And we naturally live a life like that. We are always concerned about things. So, my message to myself today and to everyone is, because we are always bombarded by the news that come to our life from every direction, we need to make sure we go back to the original good news, to kind of wash away all the fear that comes from the bad news. Because with the phone, we're always receiving these text messages, or on Facebook or on other things, we receive all these news, and they are all bad. And of course, we want to live a healthy life. But there are many fears we face in our life. And one of the fears we face and affects our life is health and death. Those are 2 main concerns that basically kind of be the most concerns for us. And again, we see in the news, if you eat this, you're not going to have a healthy life. Or if you start eating this, then you're going to start having a better life. And all of these things, and we worry about our life. And this is not strange. Even in the days of Paul, he says something about none of us wants to die or feel I'm happy to die. We don't want to die, right? We all want to live longer. And Paul was talking about this in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 4. He says, "For we groan while we are in this tent, since we are weighed down, because we do not want to be unclothed, but clothed, so that what is mortal may be swallowed up by life." We don't want to die. We all want the Lord to come while we're still alive, because we don't want to die. And that's normal, and that's also their thinking in the New Testament. So it is normal for us to think or worry about our health issues or death. But on the other hand, we need to remember the other things, the other news. Because when we remember the other news, it's about our God. And I like the stories of Jesus raising people from the dead. The story of Jesus in Mark 5, Jesus raising Jairus' daughter. By the way, the names, I say them better than in English. Because in Arabic, they are closer in the language to the Hebrew, which are the original names. So sometimes if I say the name not the way you used to it might be the way I know it better. I don't know, just doing that. So Jairus, or Jairus actually, his name is Jairus, his daughter was sick, and he was one of the synagogue people, and he went to Jesus and he said, "Jesus, please, my daughter is sick, come and heal her." And while he was going on his way, Jesus was stopped by a famous story. We know the story. Jesus was stopped by the woman who was bleeding. And she touched his clothes, and then Jesus stopped and he asked, who touched me? And that's the story. But then while this was happening, while Jesus stopped on his way, and he was talking to this woman who was healed by touching him, news came from Jairus' house that don't bother the teacher anymore, the master anymore. Your daughter is already dead. That was the news that the man received. However, Jesus heard the same news, changed the news for this man. He said, "Have faith, do not worry." And he kept going with him to his house. When Jesus arrived to his house, everyone was weeping and everyone was, and it says there was confusion in the house. Because everyone was weeping and everyone was sad, and the news was, for them, the news was done. The girl is dead. And Jesus told them, why are you crying? She's just sleeping. And they laughed at him. Just like today, they laugh at us when we give them the news. Because our news don't make sense to those who don't have the Spirit of God. That's why they don't understand it. And Jesus himself, he said, no, she's sleeping. And they laughed at him. And then Jesus sent people out. He took the parents of the girl, and he took 3 of his disciples with him. And he went in, and he said to the girl, arise. And the girl came to life again. This is the God, this is the news we need to remember. This is the God. When we face any problems with death or any health issues, we need to come back to the news that is written for us to believe. And this daughter was raised from the dead just because she just died. And people might think, oh, you know what, she just died. Maybe she wasn't really dead. I don't know. That some people, skeptics can say anything. They can think of everything. But then we see Jesus going on his way to another city at some point, and there's a funeral passing by. People are going and taking a young man who died and taking him outside the city to bury him. And he was a young man, the only son to a widow. And she was crying, and Jesus saw her in her distress, and Jesus was moved. And then he went and he stopped the funeral. Like, that would be like awkward. If you were going to do something, it has to work, right? But Jesus did have the good news. Like, he knew it. For us, it's like a believing matter. Jesus, he knew it. He stopped them with authority. This is the God we're talking about. This is the God we need to listen to the news from. Okay, so he said, though everyone believed the other news, which was common sense. The guy died. He's been dead for some time. Now we're taking him to bury him. His mom is already half through the grief. We're burying the man. But then Jesus comes and says, stop what you're doing immediately. And he stopped them, and he took the man by the hand and he said, arise. And he gave him back to his mother. This is our God. This is where we should get our news from. This is where our life should be. And when we hear the news of death, when we hear the news of sickness, immediately we need to move back, because I naturally get annoyed with Facebook. I read something, I'm like, oh, this is bad, I don't like this, and I get annoyed about it. And I naturally, over time, the more bad news I receive, the more my mind goes to the bad news, and it weighs me down. And because of this, I said this is a message for me, and of course for everyone, because we need to remember the good news. And even more, furthermore, Lazarus was dead for 4 days. He was already buried. He was already in the ground. He was already in the tomb. And the guy was like, wrapped. I mean, he couldn't even walk if he was alive still, and you wrapped him into all these cloths. And Jesus goes in there after he was there for 4 days. And Martha says, Lord, it's going to be stinky when you open this. It's going to be, it's not going to be nice. And then Jesus said, move the stone. And then he just called him by his name, come out. And the dead man, he heard, like, when you're dead, you're dead. Like, you can't hear, you have no senses. It's always amazed me that Jesus talked to a dead person, but that the person heard him in his death. And he woke up, and he walked outside, and everybody saw him, and no one could deny it. This is the news we need to talk about. So when we have any feelings or fear of death, this is what we need to always remember. When we are sick, we know that our God is a great God. We know that our God didn't just raise people from the dead, but he walked around and he healed people. And if we all have a time to share, we can all personally share about how God touched us and healed us one way or another. And that's the news we need to remind each other about as well. Jesus healed the disabled man at the pool of Bethesda. That's what the name of the pool was. He walked by there, and there was a pool, and at the pool, people gathered around the pool, and they believed there was an angel that comes and touches the water, and the first person who touches the water after the angel gets healed. Only one person gets a chance every now and then, because they never knew when the angel was coming. Sometimes we live with this kind of hope. We don't know what's going to happen next, when it's going to happen. And then at this time, we see Jesus walking into this place. Doesn't matter for what the water is, doesn't care about the angel. He walked to a man, and it says, he looked into this man who was 30 years disabled for 38 years. That's a long time. That's time when people would usually give up. I can't walk anymore. That's it. I'm done. And then he walked to the man. He said, "Do you want to walk?" He said, "I want to, but I can't get, to the water before. Every time somebody gets before me." And he said, "You don't need that water anymore. You don't need the touch of an angel. God is here." That's what God did. And He healed him, and He made him walk. This is our God. This is what we need to remember all the time. Jesus healed a man who was born blind. It doesn't matter how long the problem is or has been taking, Jesus can interfere at any time. It doesn't matter how long it was, and He will make a difference. On the other side of news, we hear a lot of news about the political situation, the situation in this country, but also in other countries, and how people are fighting, and what's going to happen next, who's going to win, all the things on the news. I listen to the news and I get annoyed with, in this state or in that state, they are allowing kids to learn certain things that shouldn't be taught to kids, in our opinion. And we think about that, and we know this is not right, and then our heart starts beating, and we don't like this, and we feel like we're losing. On the other hand, babies are being killed in other places, and we feel the injustice, and that's good, because that's a holy feeling. We need to be, God's word, and say God's word, and tell people this is wrong. But we somehow tend to end up also being weighed by these news, and we feel like we're losing all the time. But we need to remember that it is our God who took the Israelites, the Hebrews, out of Egypt and opened the sea for them to walk. It is Him who stopped the Jordan River. It is Him who made the walls of Jericho fall down and come down. Whatever the situation is, whatever the political situation is, we need to remember that the Lord reigns. It is always for us, it's always a good reminder for us to remember that the Lord reigns. He is our God. He is the one who is going to take care of the situation. I was in Lima 2 or 3 weeks ago, and there was a guy from Iran speaking to the youth, and also on a Sunday morning, multiple churches. One of them was the Alliance Church in Lima. They all came to the field house. It was a school field house where they did it, and they did a common service that Sunday. And this guy was speaking, and he was talking to them. And I know that, for me coming from the Middle East, I know that sometimes we hear, we've seen a lot of things happening, especially from the Islamists or those who are trying to kind of kill the Christians and do this and do that. And that's very dangerous. That's not good to know. And at some point, people over the time got very scared from Islam in general, because it's very dangerous and it's taking over, and that's what their plan is, and they're trying to do all of this. So what's happening, and this guy was speaking, this guy was from Iran. He was someone who related to some people in high rank in the government, and he was a very strong Muslim who was against Christians, and he actually wanted to study the Bible at some point. He wanted to fight Christians and kill them at some point. But then he read that if he can bring Christians to Islam, he can gain more goods. In Islam, you do good things, good deeds, and bad things you do, and then they are weighed, and God might give you mercy at the end. That's how it is. So he thought, so he was reading in some place, and he read that if you bring a Christian to Islam, you get a lot of deeds that will outweigh your bad deeds. So he thought, that's a good idea. And in Islam, the way things happen is, if you do good deeds, it's counted for you and your parents. That's why they raise their kids. There's no way you can leave Islam. There's no way you cannot be devoted, because that will affect me too. And then that keeps going from one child to another. So this guy was told as a child that this is how you should live your life, and because that's going to bring honor to the family, and if you don't do that, that's dishonoring the family, and it's bad. So this guy lived his life like that. But at some point, he wanted to bring Muslim Christians to Islam. So he thought he wanted to find a Bible. When he asked about one, they told him, that's a dangerous book, you can't have it. And he found a way, and he managed to buy it from a secret market. And then he bought the Bible, and he started reading the Bible. And I'm going to make this story short, but after some time reading the Bible, he got angry at some point, because the Bible says God is our Father, and for them, they tried just to be a slave for God, just to, to try to please God in a little bit. And He might have mercy on them. There's no guarantee in Islam for that. So he got angry. He's like, how can they call God, Father? But over time, while reading the Bible, in Iran, where no Christianity should be existing, where nobody was teaching this guy anything, he was reading the Bible, and then he read this about God being the Father. And on one day, he went to a shop where he was teaching Quran still. He was still reading the Bible, but he was still thinking about the idea, God is my Father. Can God be my Father? And then he went to this shop, in the back of the shop, where some kids would gather. He was teaching them. And then the owner of the shop told him, and he said, hey, I want you to meet a Christian. And then this Christian was a pastor who was minding his own business, and he was in the area and happened to be buying some things. And then he was buying things, and then they called this guy from inside. So he came out and he insulted the pastor, and he was talking to the pastor harshly. And then the pastor at the end smiled, and he said, hey, we have a church service tomorrow. Would you like to come? So the man said, yes, I will come. In his mind, he's like, oh, that's something I'm going to destroy tomorrow. And he said, yeah, I will definitely go. And he took the address. It wasn't like a church building. It was a small room. Maybe it was a little cross on the wall, and that's it. So the second morning, he woke up very early. And he said the service was at 9. He was there at 7. And the lady was opening the door. She said, the service doesn't start till 9. I'm here just to get the place ready, clean up a little bit, and that's all. He said, I'll be fine, I'll just wait inside. He thought he's going to take advantage of being inside first, and he can burn the place. He had his army clothes on and everything. But his mind was still working out the idea of God being my Father, God being my Father. He said that he went inside this room with the intention to burn the church. And as he stepped in, he felt something strange fell on him. And he felt so strongly that he wanted God to be his Father. And he was on his knees. This is a guy nobody told him about Christ. Okay, and he was on his knees there for a long time, until the pastor comes and pats him on the shoulder and says, oh, you came, I'm glad you came. Let me tell you about Jesus. He said, I just met him. This is our God. This is the God this is the news we need to listen to. This guy now is in Syria and in other countries, and he's been trying to go and tell people about Christ. A Muslim telling others about Christ. That's a powerful testimony. A guy who was trying to fight Islam is now helping others become Christians. Who was trying to take Christians to Islam is now a Christian himself, leading other Islam to Christianity. This is our God. This is a God that we believe in. This is a God that we need to keep our eyes on all the time. He is a God who saved Daniel, protected Daniel in the lion's den from the lions. He is a God who saved David from Goliath. He is the God who helped Joseph from his own brothers at some point. This is the God we need to keep our eyes on. When we see political situations going the wrong way or the other direction we wish to, we need to remember this. Do not fret when wicked men seem to succeed. Do not envy evildoers. For they will quickly dry like grass and wither away like plants. And then the last verse in Psalm 37 says, the Lord laughs in disgust at them, for He knows that their day is coming. when we hear the bad news politically and in every situation, we need always to remember God's word. We need to always remember the good news, that our God can do things. Though Christianity cannot be present in some countries, Christ can. It's not about the religion, it's about the power of God. So where we cannot go, God can go. He is still there, and He can do things. Another kind of bad news sometimes that we worry about, and sometimes also gets me, is the economical situation. Sometimes we get into financial situations and sometimes worries, and do I have enough savings? Am I getting any savings? Am I able to pay the bills at the end of the month? And all these situations. And also in these things, I wish I can read everything, but we see this woman who was a widow, who had just a young man, and the news for her was just to eat the last meal and die. This was her news, this was the situation, this is what her economical situation was telling her at that time. But then God, who was feeding Elijah through the ravens. Ravens like meat. If I like meat, I'm not giving it to you. Okay, if I have a steak, it's going to be nice, I'm just going to enjoy it. Ravens eat meat, but yet they were bringing the meat to Elijah. And they were bringing bread to Elijah. And he was drinking from the stream. And then when the stream dried, he sent him to the woman, to the widow. And it is strange, this man of God comes to this widow and says, and she said, I have this little flour and oil, I'm going to make them a dough and eat and then die. It's like, make me a cake first. Right? Doesn't make sense. God doesn't make sense. He said, because that flour is not going to end, it's not going to finish from the cup that you have. That oil is not going to end. You're going to always have oil. Even if it's a little, but it's always there. It's always available. This is our God. This is the God who we trust. This is the God who fed 5,000 people only with 5 loaves and 2 fish. This is the news we need to listen to when we feel like our economical situation is not good. Let's remember that he fed Elijah through the ravens. He fed the people. They were in the desert. There was nothing for them to eat. There was nothing for them to bring. And they had bread from heaven. How beautiful is that? This is our God. So in every situation we go through in our life, I don't know what you're going through. Is it health issues? Is it death issues? When it comes to death, sometimes the Lord doesn't heal us. Sometimes, and we thank God for medicine. Sometimes He allows us to go through medical situations. Timothy in the Bible had problems with his stomach. And he was not supposed to drink water but wine. Don't take that for yourself. That was for Timothy. Okay? So he was supposed to drink wine. And there are times, and I know that in Lebanon and the Middle East, the water comes through the mountains, out through the streams, and there's a lot of calcium or stuff in our mountains, in the rocks. So the water will cause you a lot of kidney problems over time. It's easy to develop kidney stones because of that. Probably Timothy had one of these issues, and he was asked to drink something that was distilled, something that was evaporated, so it doesn't have much. And that was a medical way, probably just to, for him to live through it. And Paul himself, he asked God to heal him. He said 3 times, I asked the Lord for healing. And he said, my grace is sufficient. Sometimes He doesn't heal us. Sometimes He doesn't raise us from the dead, but He still says, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. The God of the living, not of the dead. So even if we die, even if somebody we love died, they are still alive because we have a God of living and not of the dead. When we are sick and we are not healed, we know that God is looking into the eternal picture and not just the time we are in here. When our economical situation is not good right now, God is looking into the eternal blessings that will never end. So we just need to change our perspective from the news we receive today, from the nerve-breaking news, to the building news, the news that build our spirit, the news that build our spiritual life day after day. And again, it's just a matter of perspective. Let us always look at God's news and not the social media news, and not the news that come around us from all directions that weigh us down, but the news that builds us up. Thank you very much, and the Lord bless you. day. God bless you. Thanks for coming. God bless you. Let's pray. Let's finish with prayer. Let's end with a prayer. Lord, at this time we come and thank you, Lord, for your love, and thank you, Lord, for giving us the wisdom and your word, Lord, that we can live a life that praises you. We can live a life that brings glory to your name. Thank you, Lord, for providing for us. Thank you for giving us what we need, and thank you for giving us your grace that will help us through the hard times in life. We commit, Lord, this land to you. We know that we get annoyed when we see political situations going sometimes the other direction. But help us always remember that you reign. And Lord, there's a day that when you will show them who you are and what your people are doing. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you very much.